It's a chilly Tuesday evening in Chicago, and the wind is howling down the desolate streets. The city, bustling during the day, now appears cold and empty. The once vibrant neon lights flicker ominously as the moon hangs low, casting shadows on the darkened roads. Inside a modest two-story home in the heart of the city's south side, a mother stares at the shattered remnants of her life. Her hands are trembling, still stained with the evidence of her actions. The silence of the house is deafening, broken only by the distant sound of sirens. The woman, a single mother, never thought her life would come to this. She had always been known in the community as a hard-working, loving mom, striving to make ends meet and give her son a better life than she had. But tonight, something changed. It started like any other evening. Dinner was on the table, and her son, a quiet 15-year-old boy, was seated at the kitchen table. But by the end of the night, chaos would reign, violence, confusion, and a series of twisted events that would haunt everyone involved. The mother's world would unravel, and the city of Chicago would be left grappling with the aftermath of a crime that would shake the very fabric of the community. What would make a loving mother snap? As you listen to this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any updates on chilling true crime cases like this one. And don't forget to like and share, because sometimes the truth is stranger and darker than we can ever imagine. The small home on Chicago's south side was far from luxurious. A two-bedroom house nestled between two rundown buildings. It had seen better days. But for Denise Harris, it was home. Her life had always been a struggle, balancing multiple jobs and trying to make ends meet. Her son, Marcus, was the light of her life. At just 15 years old, Marcus was a quiet teenager, the type who kept to himself, preferring video games over social interactions. He wasn't a problem child, but like many teens, he was still trying to figure out who he was. Denise and Marcus had a complicated relationship. At times, their bond felt unbreakable, while other moments seemed strained, as if the weight of Denise's struggles had caused cracks in their connection. There had been tensions between them recently. Her job at a local diner had been taking up more time, and the financial pressure was beginning to take its toll. The lack of communication, the moments of silence over meals, and the heavy air in their small home were all signs that something was off. But no one could have predicted that on that Tuesday night, the tension would finally boil over into violence. It all started innocently enough. Denise returned from her second job, exhausted and ready for a quiet evening at home. The smell of microwaved leftovers filled the air, and Marcus, as usual, was engrossed in his phone. Their interactions had become sparse, with Denise focusing on the bills, and Marcus retreating into his digital world. Still, things were supposed to be okay. They had their problems, but they were getting by. But the evening began to take a darker turn when Denise made a simple request. "Marcus, can you please take out the trash?" A small task, something that should have been a simple, mundane request. But Marcus, tired from school, barely acknowledged her. He grumbled something under his breath, and his lack of response ignited something in Denise. Frustration had been building in her for weeks. She needed help, she was exhausted, and this moment, this small request, seemed like the last straw. What followed was a sequence of events that no one saw coming. A sharp argument broke out between the two. At first, it was just words, harsh, cutting words spoken in anger. Denise's voice, usually calm and controlled, rose in frustration. Marcus, on the other hand, retreated into defiance. The yelling escalated quickly. Denise, exhausted and mentally stretched thin, reached for the nearest object in her environment, a kitchen knife. For a moment, the house stood still, and then, within seconds, chaos erupted. What was once a heated verbal exchange became an all-out struggle. Neighbors would later report hearing shouting, but none dared to intervene. It was just another domestic dispute, another example of how the streets of South Chicago often echoed with tension and violence. But what they didn't know was that the violence was not just between two people. It was a culmination of years of pressure, unspoken grievances, and a moment of utter madness. When the police arrived, it was already too late. Marcus had been brutally attacked. His mother, standing over him, blood on her hands, was in a state of shock. Denise had snapped. Her son, her flesh and blood, lay unconscious on the floor, and she didn't know how it had happened. The investigation began almost immediately. The police, upon entering the home, found Denise in a dazed, almost catatonic state. Marcus was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The crime scene was a frenzy of confusion. Bloodstains splattered across the kitchen, the broken remnants of a family torn apart. The knife, stained with evidence of the attack, was found on the floor. The first response team questioned Denise, but she was incoherent, too shaken to provide a clear explanation. But what struck the investigators was the utter shock in her eyes. There was no remorse, no attempt to explain, just emptiness. Chapter 3. The Investigation. Detective Evelyn Matthews was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator with over 15 years on the force, she had seen countless crimes, but there was something about this case that gnawed at her. What had led Denise to commit such an unthinkable act? What was the real story? The first step was to speak to the neighbors. Several reported hearing shouting, but most said they had never seen anything particularly alarming between mother and son. To them, they were just another family living in a rough neighborhood, trying to make it work. One neighbor recalled seeing Marcus a few days before, quietly sitting on the porch, headphones in his ears, avoiding eye contact. He had seemed withdrawn, but nothing out of the ordinary. Detective Matthews knew that a deep dive into Denise's past would be necessary. She started with a criminal record. It was clean. No prior incidents of violence or abuse. She was a mother who had been doing the best she could. So why had she snapped? Through interviews with Denise's co-workers, it became clear that she had been struggling for months. Her hours at the diner had increased, and with Marcus becoming more withdrawn, she felt increasingly isolated. Some colleagues mentioned that Denise had been open about her frustrations, her struggles to make ends meet, her growing concerns about Marcus's behavior. But there was no warning that things would escalate to this level. As the investigation continued, the police began to piece together a disturbing picture. Denise's financial troubles were mounting. The bills were piling up, and she had no way to cope with the pressures of being a single mother. There were even whispers that Marcus had been experimenting with drugs, though these were only rumors. Still, the mystery of what had triggered the violence remained. The breakthrough came when Marcus regained consciousness in the hospital. Although his injuries were severe, he was able to speak. His account was chilling. According to Marcus, the argument had started over the trash, but quickly spiraled into a heated verbal exchange. He claimed that his mother, in a fit of rage, had grabbed a knife and lunged at him. His voice trembled as he recounted the event, his fears still evident. But there was something about Marcus's story that didn't add up. Denise, in her interviews, had shown no remorse, but she hadn't been entirely forthcoming either. Detective Matthews knew that there were more questions than answers, and this case was far from closed. As the investigation unfolded, the detectives found themselves at a crossroads. Several theories emerged, each with its own set of questions and uncertainties. One theory suggested that Denise had been suffering from a mental breakdown. The pressure of her life, her job, her son's behavior, and the mounting debt had pushed her beyond her limits. Perhaps the attack was a desperate cry for help, a tragic manifestation of years of stress finally spilling over. But another theory, one that came from Denise's colleagues, suggested that there had been more to the relationship than met the eye. Some said that Marcus had been a troubled teenager, rebellious and difficult to control. Could he have provoked his mother, perhaps even threatening her before the attack? As the investigation continued, the police began to uncover overlooked evidence. A neighbor had mentioned hearing the sound of breaking glass just before the argument. Did this suggest that the violence had escalated even further before the attack with a knife? Was Marcus's side of the story completely truthful, or was he hiding something? Chapter 5. The conclusion, justice or a lingering mystery. Months passed, and the case reached the courtroom. Denise was charged with attempted murder, but the defense argued that she had been in a state of temporary insanity. The prosecution fought hard to prove that her actions were premeditated. The trial was a media sensation, drawing attention from all over the country. The key question remained: had Denise been a victim of circumstance, or was she truly capable of the brutal attack on her son? In the end, Denise was convicted but given a lighter sentence than many expected. The judge, recognizing the intense mental strain she had been under, sentenced her to several years in a psychiatric facility rather than prison. But the case left lingering questions. What had truly driven Denise to this breaking point? Was she a victim of her circumstances, Or had she always been a ticking time bomb? This tragic case reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected acts of violence come from those we least expect. Denise Harris was not the kind of person anyone thought would commit such an act. Her story is a stark reminder that mental health struggles, financial pressures, and unspoken tensions can often build up, pushing even the most stable individuals to the brink. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think Denise was a victim of her circumstances? Or do you believe she could have prevented what happened? Was there a deeper issue at play that no one saw coming? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story as chilling and fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more gripping true crime stories. Thank you for listening.